You want to know how I know things are going well? In the middle of a live stream last night, the internet cut the power. No, not the internet cut the power. The power went out and cut the internet. The internet killed the live stream. Thankfully, we were like 54, 55 minutes into the thing, so it's not like we were real early in the live stream. We had, I think, covered all the important points. We're drawing close to wrapping it up anyway. But you know when things are really going well, it's not just when the power flashes and cuts your internet. It's when the power comes back on and your internet eventually reconnects and your Wi-Fi gets going again and everything starts working again and everything's good because your computer's rolling. But what you don't realize is your streaming software is still humming along. What you don't realize is that some people sat there while your power was out and stayed on the live stream while you were looking at your phone like this. And you know it's going well when for like 10 minutes, like I say, the power flashed around the 54 minute mark of our live stream last night. And for the next 10 minutes of that video, it's just me looking down at my phone. And you guys tried to tell me. I appreciate everybody in the comments last night saying, Chris, you're live. Hello, wake up. Somebody said, I guess this is what a peeping Tom feels like. And I mean, you're just a weirdo for doing that. But yeah. You guys got to see that, and I got a little bit worried. I haven't sat through the entire 10 minutes at the end of that video yet. I'm trying to lop that thing off so we can release a nice, proper 54-minute podcast for everybody to talk about a bunch of the topics that we're also going to cover here today on the Morning Pit. But I only hope I didn't do anything too weird in that final 10 minutes or say anything or hear anything or make any sounds. The dogs were making noise in the background or something like that. But yeah, that's how you know things are going well. And of course, we were live last night for another special live edition of the Panther-Lair show because there was more transfer news coming out of Pitt yesterday. Another defensive starter went into the transfer portal. Another offensive player went into the transfer portal too. And Pitt basketball landed a transfer. Let's get you the latest transfer news on the Pitt side of things, both football and basketball, here on the Morning Pit on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, Tuesday was a day. I tell you, and I think the news from Tuesday was Solomon DeShields going into the transfer portal. I mean, it was bad. You know what I mean? It stung. It was like, oh, geez. But it was also coming on the heels of Deion Hayes going into the transfer portal on Monday. You know, you start stacking them up, and it feels like the sky really is falling. And maybe it is. You know, I feel like we've done a live stream each of the last two nights. Of course, we'll be live again tonight for the Panther-Lair show at 8 o'clock, maybe 8:30. I might have to move this one back, but I'll let you know for sure. But we've done a live stream each of the last two nights because there's been major transfer news to talk about. And in both cases, yesterday and Monday, it was Pitt football losing a defensive starter and Pitt basketball adding a guy. But of course, we didn't really focus as much on the basketball side and the positive side of adding guys, which we made up for. We tried to make up for yesterday morning with a special Morning Pit, or not a special, but by talking about Cam Corrin on the Morning Pit. But it's bigger. It was bigger news. It felt like bigger news with the guys that Pitt football lost. And it's because of who they were. Deion Hayes and Solomon DeShields, a couple of seniors, a couple of guys entering their final years of eligibility. Like final year. I say years because there's two guys, but they're each entering each is entering his final year of eligibility. And deciding to go somewhere else and spend the next 4 months learning a new defense and trying to find one that'll fit him and feature him and showcase his draft prospects for the NFL, which they're both presumably going to attempt to make next year. It's crazy stuff. Everybody's got their own motivations. I think we can all make reasonable assumptions about what the motivations are here. But we're going to start off today's Morning Pit by talking about the loss of Solomon DeShields and what it means for Pitt's defense and what it means for Pitt's linebacking core heading into the 2024 season. Of course, this is the Morning Pit here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Do us a solid and like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like I told you, we went live each of the last two nights sort of not out of nowhere. I mean, we announced it a few hours earlier that, hey, we're going to do a live show tonight at 8 o'clock. But we did sort of emergency episodes, special live editions, in addition to, our regularly scheduled live show that we'll do tonight. But if you want to make sure you don't miss any of those live shows when we kind of bust them out of nowhere, the place to do it is right here by subscribing to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And that way you won't miss any of that, our live shows or any of our Pitt video content. So the live shows, like I say, the last 2 days, we were talking about Deion Hayes on Monday night. We talked about Solomon DeShields a lot last night. And I thought today we could just kind of update that conversation and talk about what the linebacking core looks like after Solomon DeShields left. He was Pitt's third leading tackler last year. I think he was second on the team in tackles for loss. Tied for like third or fourth on the team in sacks. He had 2, which probably says more about the state of Pitt's overall pass rush than it does about Solomon DeShields in particular. When it comes down to it, though, DeShields was projected to be Pitt's probably best linebacker, one of their best defensive players, and one of the best overall players on the team. I think you would probably say, yeah, he was projected to be the number 1 linebacker, like the best linebacker. I think if you look at overall players on defense, you would put him in a pretty select group, top 3, maybe top 2, and maybe not number 2. As far as the top players on defense, Donovan McMillan would be in that conversation after, topping 100 tackles last season. And so DeShields was up there, and as a returning player, a starter who had a locked-in role, and then a lot of this is what we talked about with Deion Hayes on Monday night, of being locked into a role that is going to feature you in a defense that fits you really well. I mean, you're not going to find many defenses that are a better fit for a pass-rushing defensive end like Deion Hayes than Pitt's defense. A lot of teams use linebackers in a lot of ways, but Solomon DeShields in his money linebacker role, and remember the money linebacker plays to the short side of the field, so the boundary side of the hash marks. That's a playmaking position. You get to blitz a lot. You get to put your head down and make a lot of tackles against the run, and you're going to get opportunities to drop into coverage and maybe get your hand on the ball and make a few plays that way. It's a pretty juicy role for a linebacker, particularly if you really know how the position works. And we've seen guys over the years grow into a lot of these spots. Certainly the safeties and the outside linebackers in particular, I think we've seen guys grow into those roles as they learn the defense, they learn the positions, and learn what they have to do and what they're expected to do. And by the time, guys get 3-4 years into it, they're often really good in those roles. When you saw Eric Howlett and Brandon Hill grow into those positions. You've seen some of the outside linebackers over the years grow into those positions. And I think you saw Solomon DeShields make big leaps last year, setting himself up for a big senior season. And this is the thing that's sort of, and I talked about this on the live stream last night. This is the thing that I kind of don't get. I don't want to sit back and judge people's decisions. Everybody has their own motivations. I think we can all make assumptions about what the motivations were here for DeShields and Hayes. But I don't want to judge that too much. I mean, you got to do what you feel like you got to do. But one of the things I don't get is I think when you look at the big picture and long term of what you're really trying to accomplish here, which I presume to be getting to the NFL, where you can make the real money, the lifetime money, the generational money, that if that's the goal, I don't know if walking away from this defense to play in a brand new defense where you may or may not be featured in the same way, where you may or may not be in such a prominent role, where you may or may not be in a defense that fits you quite as well as this one does, and where you definitely are not going to have the knowledge of and experience with the defense to maybe play it at the highest level. Like, I don't know if that fits you into, I don't know if that fits the goals. I'm really not sure. So, but again, that's, Solomon DeShields, Deion Hayes, these guys have to make, the best decisions for themselves, right? So that's what they're going to do. They're going to the portal. They're going to transfer. We'll see where they end up. And good luck. Best of luck to you guys. I'm sure they'll find an NIL deal better than the ones they were getting from Pitt. And we'll see what they can do. So where does that leave Pitt now? And you don't want to, I mean, it's not about whether you want to or not. You shouldn't, it's hard to sit back and say, oh, they lost a returning starter at outside linebacker who was the team's third leading tackler last year. No big deal. It's not going to matter. They'll be fine. You can't really sit back and say that because it is a big deal. You're losing a prominent player. You're losing a really good player. But at the same time, we talked all spring and we've talked most of the offseason about this linebacking core and kind of how deep they look, how strong they look, and how this should be one of the strengths of the defense. And I know, said all this stuff last year. I talked last year about the linebackers being a strength and all that stuff, and it was sort of mixed results. Certainly my heavy emphasis on Bengali Kamara last year didn't exactly work out the way I anticipated that it would, and I can tell you it didn't work out the way the coaches anticipated that it would either. But when I look at this linebacking core, I still think there's a lot to like. There was a lot to like with Solomon DeShields in the mix, and I still think there's a lot to like with the remaining guys. I mean, you could start with the veterans like Brandon George. And I think Pitt fans have a mixed opinion on Brandon George. I don't know if his career has been as productive as you would like to have seen. A lot of time he was playing behind Servassier Dennis, but even when that period ended, he ended up, he was still playing behind Shane Simon. I think he got hurt in there, and so that limited it as well. But I think he's a guy who knows the defense. Probably can play a little bit faster than people give him credit for, and I think he'll be fine as a middle linebacker. He's certainly a physical player and can wrap up and make good tackles, right? And then you got Key Thompson as a veteran guy, a grad transfer who came in from Ohio, made 1 billion tackles at Ohio, so he's a very productive linebacker, and he could work as the backup middle linebacker behind George, or maybe the starting money linebacker, taking over that role that Solomon DeShields is leaving vacant. And then your other sort of penciled-in starter is Kyle Lewis, redshirt sophomore, who's at the star linebacker position. That's the other one. That's the one on the other side of the field, the wide side of the hashes. And, Lewis is a guy that the Pitt staff has been excited about for the past 3 years. He got hurt as a freshman, so that really limited things. Played more last year. Or I think he got hurt last year, too. But I think they're really excited about his potential, and I think they've got him penciled into a starting job at the star linebacker position. And then you get into the 3 guys who were true freshmen last year. And I mean, I think I've been talking these guys up since they were recruits. Certainly talked them up last year when they were true freshmen, and I've been talking them up a lot this spring. Jordan Bass, Rasheem Biles, and Braylon Lovelace. And I'm not sure which one. I mean, I think each guy is really exciting in his own right. Bass, I think, was one of the biggest signings in that 2023 recruiting class. He's the guy who actually stepped in. If you recall the Wake Forest game, Solomon DeShields played 1 snap in that game, and it was the opening kickoff. He got hurt and missed the rest of the game. So he actually played all 12 games last season and had 58 tackles, was the team's 3rd leading tackler. But he really only played 11 games and was the team's 3rd leading tackler. Might have moved up if he had played in that Wake Forest game. Who knows what happens in that game if he plays. But he's out. He misses that entire game because he got hurt in the opening kickoff. Jordan Bass is the guy who got the call and stepped in there. Bass, like I said, was one of the top overall prospects, not necessarily by rating, but I think when you look at him as a prospect, you look at his offer sheet and how he was as a player, one of the top prospects in that class, and I think a really exciting player for Pitt's outside linebacking core in 2024 and beyond. I think he's probably going to be that star linebacker, and I would expect him to be the backup there behind Kyle Lewis. And then you have Rasheem Biles, who I think was one of the most exciting players in the spring game, probably made as many plays, if not more, than anybody else on defense in the Blue Gold game on Saturday. Obviously he had a bunch of blocked punts last season, and I think the coaches are excited about how he projects and probably could be a money linebacker, could play star, could play either one of those outside linebacker positions, but definitely looks like he's ready to play a lot this year. And then there's Braylon Lovelace from little old Leechburg, stepping in, playing a lot last year as a true freshman at a scoop and score touchdown at Virginia Tech. And he's a guy with Key Thompson, the transfer from Ohio, sitting out this all of spring due to an injury. Lovelace ended up being the backup middle linebacker for a lot of spring camp. Really learned a lot of the middle linebacker role. And there's overlap between the middle linebacker and the money linebacker. They both play inside the box. And you see players kind of, they like to get guys trained at all three spots, but if they're only going to be trained at two, they often get trained at the middle and the money. There seems to be more overlap there than there is with the star linebacker. And so Lovelace kind of projects at both of those. So then when you look at your two deep, with those six guys I just mentioned, George, Thompson, Lewis, Bass, Biles, and Lovelace, if that's your two deep, right, and if nobody else leaves, you should be good there. But if that's your two deep, I think you're in pretty good shape. I really do. And if you start George with, Lewis and either Thompson or Lovelace, and then, flip-flop, either Thompson and Lovelace starts at money, and the other one is the backup middle linebacker. And then you have Biles and Bass as your two backup outside linebackers, and you rotate those guys. I think you can see more rotation at the middle linebacker spot than we've seen in the past few years. And I think you can see all those spots really rotate because they have one of the better full six-man two deeps that we've seen at Pitt at the linebacker position over the last, in quite some time. And that doesn't even count the true freshmen coming in this year. Cam Lindsey, four-star linebacker from Aliquippa. Jeremiah Marcelin, who's really good, came in from Miami, enrolled this spring, or enrolled in January, took part in spring camp. He's a little bit of a middle linebacker, money linebacker. And Davin Bruton, who's from New Jersey, I think is one of the steals in this recruiting class. And coming in as a true freshman to be the middle, to learn the middle linebacker position. I still think that group is good. And if by chance, total misfortune, they lose another guy, either the transfer portal or injury, they still, depending on who they lose, they'll still have five really good options there. And I think you can get through a season with five really good linebackers. I'm really bullish on that group. Now, that group would be much better with Solomon DeShields as part of it, but I'm still really bullish on that group. The other transfer portal news we should mention, it came out yesterday. Christian Bear went into the transfer portal. Not a big surprise. I think, we don't often, I try to avoid speculating on players who are going to go into the portal. It feels unseemly. It's like speculating on which guys are going to get fired, which coaches. And we do it, and we talk about it, and it's part of the conversation. I just don't particularly care. I don't like doing it much. But this was one where the writing was on the wall. I mean, it seemed so clear and obvious that Bear would be a transfer after Eli Holstein passed him in spring camp. You know what I mean? I think if you're a guy who started 5 games last year and you come into the spring and you understand you got benched at the, near the end of last year. And so somebody else might be playing ahead of you. You might be the number 2, but then by the end of spring, you've been passed up by a younger player and you're now the number 3 quarterback after starting 5 games last year. Yeah, you might look for another option. Of course, Bear can transfer and play right away as a grad transfer. There was a rule. It was that you could transfer and play right away on your first transfer. But if you transfer again, you have to sit out a year. Well, that doesn't apply to grad transfers. They can pretty much do whatever they want. And even now, the multiple transfer thing doesn't apply. Guys can pretty much transfer as many times as they want and go play right away, which makes me at least keep an eye on a few of the guys that Pitt has added as transfers over the last couple of years. They have prominent players on their roster, 2 deep players and starters who came to the school as transfers. You used to think, well, at least you're going to be able to hold on to them for a few years because they can't transfer and play right away. Well, now they can. They can transfer again and play right away. So you got to kind of watch that. But as far as Veer goes, there's no question about the physical talent. Throws the ball as well as anybody on the roster, maybe better than anybody on the roster. I don't think it's a surprise that he was the quarterback for Pro Day, throwing above meets. He's the best quarterback you could have. He's one of the best quarterbacks you could possibly have to throw in a Pro Day setting, which is to say when no one's trying to defend. But when you put defenders out there, things tend to go a little bit awry for Christian Bear. And that's what we heard about him last spring. That's what we heard about him last summer in training camp. And when he got into the games, that's what happened. He had the big win over Louisville in his first start. It was a monster game. He had the game at Wake Forest where he played well enough to win, just had a poor decision or maybe a poor judgment by the referee on a slide play. And then over the next 3 starts, he threw 6 interceptions. I think 3 starts, right? Notre Dame, Florida State, and Syracuse. He threw 6 interceptions and fumbled twice. And that was it. And it didn't get it, by everything we heard, it didn't get any better this spring. The turnovers were still an issue. And I think it's one of those things where you lose the trust And I think Pat Narduzzi is very much a circle of trust kind of guy. But I think you lose the trust. And then if I think Veer needed to make a significant turnaround on turnovers this spring and avoid them like the plague this spring. But he wasn't able to do it. He, I think still had issues with turnovers. The coaches said a few different times that Nate Yarnell and Eli Holstein had committed the fewest turnovers. A pretty clear absence from that list being Veer. And so they put him down to the third quarterback. And when his teammates, when the other players drafted for the spring game, they drafted Nate Yarnell first and they drafted Eli Holstein second. So they sent the message as well. And now Christian Veer will go find somewhere else to play. He's got, like I say, he's got great physical skills. He's got a great arm. It looks beautiful when he throws the ball. Just sometimes it goes to the wrong color jersey. You can't have that. Can't do it. So 2 more guys come off the scholarship list. We'll update the scholarship board probably at the end of the week as we see if more guys enter the transfer portal throughout the week. But Dayon Hayes went on Monday, and then yesterday Solomon DeShields and Christian Veer joined him. So those numbers are whittling down. We said they would need to whittle down to get to the 85-man scholarship limit. We knew they would whittle down. We weren't sure how it would happen. Didn't necessarily think it would be 2 defensive starters, but here we are. It's 2024, folks. This is what happens. Listen, do me a favor and like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, so you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. We've got a live Panther-Lair show tonight. Jim Hammett and I will be with you for an hour talking Pitt sports, probably starting at 8 o'clock, maybe starting at 8:30, depending on some different things. I'll let you know. We'll keep you posted on Twitter and on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. The most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Join the conversation with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans all day, every day, talking about Pitt sports at Panther-Lair.com. Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I apologize for the abrupt end to last night's live stream, but we'll have one tonight, hopefully with no power outage, and we can get our full hour of Pitt sports talk in there. So we'll see you tonight for the live show and talk to you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.